Well, this should be a fun and interesting week of the Voice of Wrestling. It is an audio-only edition. Unfortunately, technical difficulties do pop up every now and again. If you're an avid long-time Voice of Wrestling fan, you know that we have these occasionally, and we've had a pretty good run, Nick. So I'm happy to say that this is one of the only times that unfortunately we just couldn't get around the technical difficulties that we had come up. We will have it fixed by next week. But, I think it's fitting, Nick, because just this week, the album of Elias dropped, and that's audio only. And so I feel like that's maybe why we had to go in this direction. Maybe that's why the universe said, hey, you guys are going to have an audio-only edition of the show. But also, we'll spare people a week of looking at our faces. So we'll try to look at the half glass full, and we'll move on because there's plenty to talk about. And of course, Nick, you had a week off, and I know you've got plenty on your mind. How have you been, buddy?
I've been good, and I think now that you mention Elias and his album, which is, it's charting on iTunes.
It's phenomenal.
It's like ranked like number 12 or 13 on iTunes right now, top downloaded albums. So maybe, because his album is doing so well, maybe the fact that people can't see our faces, we're going to check the numbers from the show.
Right.
And it's going to have skyrocketed.
It could.
We're going to have millions more listeners because people don't have to tolerate the way you and I look.
That's a good point. You never know. I mean, I think it's good. And I also want to, just since we're on this topic, I think Raw this week was really good as it related to Elias. I mean, I think they kind of found ways to put over his album and I'm surprised by the reaction to the album. I don't know what people expected. But there's been a little bit more criticism towards the album that I've at least noticed in some of the comments and some Facebook posts.
Wait a minute. Are you suggesting that people online are criticizing something?
Yeah, I know. But, I mean, sometimes...
what did they expect, a Grammy Award-winning album here?
I'm not really sure. I think this is... but that's the point. I think that when you listen to the 4 songs on this album, which I listened to the majority of most of them, I think, yesterday sometime.
Have you memorized all of the songs
Not yet.
You have the Jeff Jarrett song?
Not yet.
So they haven't made their way into your shower yet?
Not quite. I'm getting it is catchy, though, to the hey, hey, hey.
His voice sounds great. I mean, I don't know if it's heavily produced in the studio. I'm sure it is, but for what if you listen to that album, and you didn't know that this was a WWE superstar, if I just heard that song on it's kind of got somewhat of a country vibe to it.
Yeah, a lot of them
If I
did.
heard that on a country radio station, I wouldn't think it's any different than most of the music.
Okay, well, let's not go too far.
I don't know if that's speaking very highly of country music, but we don't have to go there.
No, I think obviously it's like the vocals were produced to the point where it's like, hey, he hit a few high notes. I mean, they made it where he didn't sound that bad. The music was kind of what you would expect.
Yeah,
the lyrics, the lyrics
thing is, in the studio. But in the studio nowadays, you could do anything you want.
Agreed.
You could put my wife in a studio, and somehow she will not sound annoying.
But what they did
when you hear her speaking,
what they did though was they still kept it a joke in the end because of the lyrics.
Oh, sure. Well, I love the title of the one song, the Ballad of Every Town I've ever been to,
or whatever.
I mean, he's still a total heel in the album.
Absolutely.
I loved it. I thought it was, for what it was, and even in his performance of it on Raw this week, I loved how he was doing it, and then he said, I'm not feeling this, and he stopped and did it again. He's still just a total heel. So I love the fact that he maintained character even in this album recording, which I don't know if it freaked other people out that listened to it and had no idea who this guy was, but I thought it was a great idea. It's a fun idea.
Nick, Bryant Burns of Voice of Wrestling, the senior editor at voiceofwrestling.net, joined me last week, and one of the things that we discussed, and I wanted to give you the opportunity as we kind of segue into some of the discussion. We've got plenty to talk about tonight. Obviously, we know now Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns is set. There's huge.
Well, that was a bit of a Freudian slip there.
Yeah, no kidding.
Huge
backlash over that, as expected. We had the huge announcement from Stephanie, and of course Vince even made a return for this, along with Triple H, about the all-women's pay-per-view Evolution coming up. We'll talk about that. But the fact, Nick, that an all-women's pay-per-view, and Elias's album dropping, there are some other subtle storylines that we'll talk about tonight. Kevin Owens and Braun Strowman, something that I wanted to kind of touch on as well, and but the fact that Elias's album is really something that we feel like we should spend some time on kind of goes to one of the main discussions that Bryant and I had last week, and I want to just get your thoughts on it. We posted something on Facebook, on the Voice of Wrestling Facebook page, just a recap of mine and Bryant's show last week when you were absent, and several, and one of the topics that we listed, that we discussed was, why are people not talking and just about how bad the product is overall. Ratings are at an all-time low. And, you and I have had this discussion in the past couple of months where we discuss, is there a number that's too low? Is WWE too big to fail? They're still managing to land these massive TV deals. The WWE network is good. They're as profitable as they've ever been, Nick. But ratings are bad. Storytelling is not great at all. And then of course I know we'll get into discussion about the Brock Lesnar Roman Reigns thing, which is kind of the epitome of what we're discussing. But I am curious to just your overall thoughts, and I don't want to be negative Nancy again this week. We were kind of that way last week. But Nick, your thoughts just overall on the WWE product, especially as it relates to the ratings and how bad they've been and how bad they continue being. Are you expecting anything to change at any point here in the near future? Like, what is it that is making Vince and Triple H and Stephanie continue with the status quo when every week in and week out, we don't get very compelling programs? I mean, with the exception of maybe one or two decent segments a night. I'm not saying we have to go all the way back to the Attitude Era or anything close to it, but to me, it just seems like the status quo is honestly here to stay. They're not making any major changes. It just doesn't seem good, and the ratings are reflecting that, but yet nothing seems to be changing in the minds of the top brass at WWE. So my question to you is, why do you think that is, and do you think it's a problem?
Well, there's no reason for them to change. It's only a problem if Fox and NBC Universal do not offer them $1 billion for their TV product. So if you ask any of them, and I think we mentioned this before, what's the problem? They would say, what do you mean, what's the problem? As an audience, we might say, fix this, and they're going to say it's not broken. We just had two giant networks paying us the most lucrative television deals we've ever secured for this product. So there's clearly nothing wrong with it. And I think, though, the other thing you have to do is you have to separate the two audiences here. People like you and I, someone like myself that works within the internet wrestling community, we're a different audience that have different wants. Mike Killam, who works over at ProWrestling.com, he said something interesting on Twitter the other day that I firmly agree with. And this is actually an old Jim Ross sort of saying. Jim Ross used to say, your free television show, you give them 75% sizzle, you give them 25% steak. When it gets to the pay-per-view, you flip it. You flip it. So sizzle referring to storyline, build-up, character development.
Sure.
The steak referring to the in-ring content. Now, the online fan, the internet wrestling community member, is always going to want and crave the in-ring product over the mainstream storytelling, right? The Slammiversary pay-per-view on Sunday, rave reviews from everyone on the internet. Why? Because it was a tremendous in-ring product. Now, that's not to say that they didn't tell good stories. That's not to say that it wasn't set up well. It was. And they used their television time leading up to Slammiversary very well in terms of setting up all of these feuds and giving you that payoff. But the internet wrestling fan is always going to want something different from the mainstream fan. And so you're going to have the voices out there that will always argue, well, no, look, the numbers will say that, people love the product when you're getting more in, when you look at the Attitude Era, you look at the television shows, it was being dominated by guys like Stone Cold Steve Austin and Vince McMahon. And those feuds were not wrestling matches. Those were talk segments. Those were in-ring segments. Those were promo segments. But the majority of fans who are not that internet wrestling community, that's that mainstream fan, they want that. They want something different. Well, the problem that we're starting to see is that even the mainstream fan is starting to reject what WWE is offering. And that's evidenced by these low numbers. You saw a couple weeks ago Raw drawing the lowest number that it's ever lowest viewership number it's ever drawn in the history of the show.
Yeah.
And now, we saw some slight increases leading into Extreme Rules. Now after Extreme Rules, this week's Raw number about another 2.7 million. But what that's showing you is that even the mainstream fan who might tune in for something different, might tune in for a Roman Reigns, is not tuning in for those reasons anymore. And again, Chris, we talked about this before. I think it's too premature for me to answer the question, is it a problem? Because we've got to see what happens in October of 2019. When those new lucrative deals kick in, when WWE SmackDown moves over to Fox, when Raw remains with NBCU, let's see if there will be network pressure now to up those ratings and provide a better product. That will tell whether or not there is a problem. If they continue shelling out these dollars for this TV product and it's hovering, WWE's drawing between 2 and 3 million viewers every week. If the networks are happy with it, then there's not a problem, because you do have to remember this. Even with the show drawing a disastrously low rating, whatever that was a couple weeks ago, that 2.3, 2.4 million people that tuned in, it's still amongst the highest rated shows on cable television. So I think that show that did that low, that 2.3, 2.4 million viewers, it was still like the 5th, 6th, 7th most watched television show on cable TV. So when you look at it in that aspect, relatively speaking, it's not bad. It's not bad. It's bad compared to where it used to be. And, fans like us that remember the Attitude Era and remember when 5, 6 million people were watching the show, we can say this is bad compared to that, and it is. But compared to everything else that's on cable, it's still the highest rated show on USA every week.
Yeah, but I think it's a problem. I think it's a problem when you first, bypass the fact that it's still one of the highest rated shows on TV. And also, let's not forget, there's just more options out there than there were 15 to 20 years ago. I mean, it is a different landscape. But I think it's a problem that you still that it's okay at this point now to dismiss all the fans that have left along the way and that continue to leave, as evident by the declining ratings overall. And then I think it's also another problem when we are now okay, at least you kind of made it seem okay, waiting until next year, over a year from now, until we get to see if they're going to make any changes. It shouldn't be the Fox deal or the changes in late next year because of the, with the TV changes they're making, for us to simply start getting compelling TV again. And also, let's say that, look, the separation between the internet fans and the mainstream fans to me, is almost separation mainly anymore between really young kids and then everybody else, because everybody's on the internet most of the time these days. You can hear it in the crowd anymore that the internet wrestling fans, the hardcore wrestling fans, Nick, are making it their way and their voices heard into the mainstream anymore. That's why the reaction to Roman Reigns is as vibrant and as loud as it is. It's no longer a small sector of the overall fan base in WWE. Every city they go to, the crowd is very, very much in line and in tune with what you and I have always kind of labeled internet wrestling fans. I don't think that you can label it that way anymore. You've got very young kids that parents might not allow them on the internet, and then you've got everybody else, which is now the mainstream. I don't think the internet wrestling community is not mainstream anymore. I just feel like that the collective voice that they have now is overall mainstream. And so I feel like, yes, I agree with you that there's still a big portion, and what's leading that charge is really good in-ring talent and matches with storytelling as kind of a secondary. But I don't think that that's the case. I think that's just what they claim they want. I think that they would still be okay with the Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Vince McMahon storyline. The Rock saying what he wants to say when he wants to say it, and giving all the freedom to go out there and do those things. Nobody's given that freedom, and that's one of the biggest issues that I've got. One of the things, though, as we segue, Nick, because I know Bryant and I spent a lot of time on that last week, and we'll keep following that, because obviously I think Paul Heyman now on the Raw writing team, the creative team. I think we'll
that's something that's something that I can clarify.
Yeah, please do.
He's not on the creative team per se.
Okay.
He's there overseeing the Roman Reigns Bobby Lashley feud, because that pertains to Brock Lesnar's feud. So, he was actually backstage at Raw this week, even though he wasn't on television. He was there, again, offering his input and contributing to the Roman Reigns Bobby Lashley angle. So,
so it's
to
not
say he's
Raw
on the creative
overall.
team would mean
right.
that he might be writing other things, or that he's a permanent member of the creative team. He's not. He's only there offering input into Brock Lesnar, as he has done in the past.
Well, then, okay.
He's overseeing. He's always a creative part of Brock Lesnar's angles.
Is there any news on? Is that a potential segue? What happens to him if Brock leaves after SummerSlam, or leaves? I mean, do we know? Is there?
No, we don't know. What his future would be. He's always maintained publicly. And this may be under the guise of a work. I'm not necessarily sure if it's entirely true, but he has always maintained publicly that if Brock Lesnar leaves, he leaves. He's not necessarily interested in quote unquote advocating or managing anyone else right now. So my educated guess would be that if Brock Lesnar leaves, he's gone as well. But just as far as his contributions to the WWE creative team right now, that is as limited. It pertains. Yeah. To Brock Lesnar's story.
So either way, I feel like, one of the things, though, as we kind of segue, one of the things that WWE is doing right, at least in some ways, is and as we kind of now get into the big story of the week, leading into Raw this week, and of course the SmackDown women's roster over there on Raw, we knew something big, and then of course the speculation kind of started leading, at least on the day of Raw, that it probably wasn't all women's pay-per-view. I mean, we didn't know what it was going to be exactly, but there was a handful of options it could be. And, of course, I think everybody kind of landed on the idea of an all-women's pay-per-view once they heard some of the details leading into Raw. I think overall, the women's revolution, Nick, is interesting to me in a couple of ways. One, I think it's great. I think that's one thing WWE has done exceptionally well. They've put a ton of stock and energy into it, and they've elevated the women to a point that they've never really been as a group at in a long, long time. And I think it's something that is desperately needed as far as this all-women's pay-per-view, and the idea that some of the older women as well are going to come back into the fold now to kind of help put over some of the newer stars, which I assume is going to be the goal with that. You're not going to. I hope they're not going to see. You're not seeing Trish Stratus versus Lita. Because that doesn't really help anybody, with the exception of maybe more eyeballs on the pay-per-view in general. But I don't think you need that. I think the women of today need some good rubs, and there's not enough women for them to get those rubs off of. So I feel like that there's a lot of good things going into this if they set it up the right way. But Nick, I guess my question as we kind of open up the discussion about Evolution and this all women's pay-per-view is, how do you view it with the idea of, this potentially not being a one-time only thing, that this could be an annual event for sure, but how do you view it when it comes to the overall drawing power of the women? I mean, WWE wants to put them over, and they did it in that opening promo between Vince and Steph, mainly Triple H and Stephanie, really putting over how far the women have come. And they have in theory. I mean, the first ever's everything they've done in the last year or two is evident that in theory they've come a long way, Nick. And we may be heading to a women's main event at WrestleMania next year, which would be the first time ever. But my question to you, Nick, is how do the fans really perceive how far the women have come? Do you look at them, with the exception of a Ronda Rousey at this point, do you look at them as the drawing power that Vince and Triple H and Stephanie have tried to put them over as? Is it more just, is there really anything there? I mean, yes, you can add all women pay-per-views. You can do the first ever Hell in a Cell, all women, Hell in a Cell, an Elimination Chamber, and Royal Rumble, and you can do all these things, and it's great. So the perception they're putting over is that these women are as equal to the men as they are, and that's fine. But are the fans buying that, at least in your mind? Because if it wasn't for Ronda, Nick, and if it wasn't for Trish and Lita and some of these girls coming from, I mean, would people be watching this pay-per-view? I mean, really, 50% of the fans, would they be watching this pay-per-view if it was not for Ronda and then obviously the announcements that Trish, Lita, and probably some other girls from the past are going to come back, and that's exciting in some ways, but otherwise, I mean, are the girls of today, the revolution of women, is it really where Vince and Stephanie are trying to claim that they really are at?
Well, I don't think it's at that point, because if it was, then they wouldn't have the need to bring in the Litas and the Trish Stratuses and the Beth Phoenixes and load up. They know what they're doing. They know that they are loading this thing up. They have already, and on the one hand, and I'll get to this in a second, but they've already announced you are going to have 4 title matches on this show. So you're going to have Raw, SmackDown, and NXT women's titles defended on the show. You're also going to have the NXT UK title, which hasn't even been decided yet. That'll probably be decided at the upcoming TV tapings that they do in England. And then on top of that, you're going to have the finals of the Mae Young Classic, plus all of these legends that are appearing.
Right.
This is going to just be an absolutely stacked card. Now, between now and then, they're going to have to get me to, I think there's enough for this initial event. There's going to be enough star power here. And, just like with something like All In, when it's the first of its kind, there's going to be a mystery about it. What's this thing going to be?
Right.
So, I think it's going to do a lot better than it might do because it's the first version of it. You're going to have the Ronda Rouseys. I disagree with you that, the Trish versus Lita, last night after the announcement was made, Mickie James actually challenged Trish to a match on Twitter. I'd like to see that match.
Well, Mickey's still active at least, though.
For your first look, you're going to have enough of the new women featured on this show. Like I said, you've got the finals of the Mae Young and the fourth. That's 5 matches already there that we know are not going to involve the legends. So if you want to give me a nostalgia match, and look, someone like a Mickie James, we know why she's back in WWE. She's not there to be the women's champion anymore. She's in that Chris Jericho role now where she's there to help put over the new talent. So, you know, she hasn't really been in anything very meaningful since she's come back. I'd love to see her and Trish. Trish looked great at the Royal Rumble. Mickie obviously still looks really great. I'd love to see that one-on-one match for old time's sake one more time, especially because we know we're getting a very prolific dose of the new women in WWE on that show. Because it's this first one, because it's more or less celebrating, you know, like Stephanie said, then, now, forever. You know, I don't mind that. But if they felt like they could pull this thing off without those women, then they wouldn't bring them in. So no, you know, to answer your question, I don't think, and you know, I mean, like, look at what they're doing with Bayley and Sasha Banks right now. You know, it's like this ridiculous story of them. They hated each other and they're in therapy, and now all of a sudden they're friends again. You know, they're dropping the ball on a lot of the women in WWE right now. But that's no different than what they're doing with guys. I mean, you know, you want to sit here and talk about, is there going to be interest in people buying tickets to go to this women's event when we're about to get into a discussion about how nobody cares about the SummerSlam main event with Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns. So if they can't give me that, why am I to assume they're going to do any better or really any worse than the women? So which is why they have to rely on guys like Brock Lesnar still, which is why they still have to bring in, you know, heavyweights like John Cena versus Triple H for a Greatest Royal Rumble event, because they lack that ability to create major stars for whatever reason that is.
Well,
and that is something that I think affects the men and the women.
I want to jump in a little bit and again kind of press on the disagreement that we have as far as nostalgia matches in the women's. Now, while I don't think it's going to help or hurt one way or the other, or you know, I'm semi-indifferent on the idea that every legend needs to be used to elevate a new today's woman or women. I think when you talk about Trish and Lita, which are going to be two of the biggest that they could bring back as far as legends go to be a part of this, I completely disagree that it's okay just because it's nostalgia, or Mickie even though Mickie's an active wrestler, I think that she's not a focal point. I mean, she's a sidekick to Alexa to put her over. So to me, Alexa needs a push or a rub from these girls. Like, to me, the story would be, you talk about Trish, you know, you have Trish and Lita come out at one point to kind of nicely put over a competitive match between the two of them. But then you get Mickie James and Alexa Bliss to come out and talk about how nobody wants to see that. Assuming Alexa doesn't, you know, if she's defending her championship, it can't be her, but somebody else at that point comes over and talks about nobody wants to see the two of you wrestle again. This is our time. And then, of course, it easily sets up a tag match where maybe Trish and Lita tag together because then you still get kind of the nostalgia of Lita and Trish, and you get the ability to have a fatal four-way where they can still challenge each other in the actual match, but they're still working with a couple other new girls. I think the tag match makes more sense. It protects them a little bit with the ring rust. I mean, there's a lot of benefits to not having these girls go one-on-one. What is the advantage, unless somebody's going to come out and attack the shit out of them afterward? What's the advantage of having just a nostalgia match? I mean, unless there's enough legends to go around. You know, so if it is Trish and Lita, but yet you have another couple of girls that can come in and obviously work with the new talent, then that's fine too. But I just don't know that they're going to have enough big names in the women to bring over to come along that's going to allow them the ability to give just only a nostalgia match between the two top girls they could bring back in Trish and Lita, I feel like they've got to start giving, because just as you mentioned, Nick, right now the women aren't where they could sell this pay-per-view on their own. They're not. I mean, Alexa Bliss is great. Asuka is nowhere near where she used to be, but she's still up there as far as a top draw, as far as women are concerned, in my opinion. And Charlotte Flair is there. And then, of course, you got Ronda Rousey. Who else, really, though? Who else is there? I mean, they've got to start.
Well, right. But again, again, though, you could say the same thing for the men. I mean, it's
I
when
agree.
you're talking about
right.
those top draws that are going to bring people in terms of main event talents, there's few of them on that side too. One could argue, and if you're going to have, look, we're going to assume, I would imagine, that if they do have some kind of a Legends match, if it's a Mickie James versus Trish Stratus one more time, I would assume Trish is going to be appearing on television in the weeks before to lead up to that. And of course, you could have then other women coming in, like you said, a member of the Riot Squad or something, saying no one wants to see this. You are old, and maybe they have a tag match leading up to it or something like that.
Nick, you might not like who they have. You might not like who they have on the men's side that they're pushing, but don't get it twisted. Roman Reigns, if they had a big-time legend coming back, and they've done it in the past with, obviously, when it comes to Roman being put over by big names in general, that's why Roman Reigns, regardless of what fans think of him, they're all in on him, no pun intended. So they're going to have him work with the people they feel like, which in this case is Brock Lesnar. He's their top draw. He's not a legend necessarily, but he's not the active full-time guy anymore. If John Cena came back, you better believe it's not going to be John Cena versus The Rock at this point. They're going to use John Cena or The Rock or whoever big, whatever big name that comes back at any point in the next year or any time in the future. They're going to be, so to me, there is a difference between the guys. If you don't look at Alexa Bliss at this point on the same level as it relates to the women as you do Roman Reigns on the men, Nick, then you're missing the point of all of this in my mind. Roman Reigns is going to be stuffed down our throat, and every chance they have to elevate him, since he's their guy, they're going to do it. And Legends would be a part of that solution if it's available to them. So if The Rock or if John Cena, if and when John Cena comes back and starts working a program, you better believe it's going to be to put over somebody that they want to put over. And I don't think that it's fair to the women at this point, especially when they desperately need it as much as anybody else, to not allow the Alexa Blisses, the Asukas, the Charlotte Flairs, even the Ronda Rouseys at this point, the full-time active girls that need to carry this promotion when Trish and Lita are gone. I mean, it's wrestling 101 in my mind.
Yeah, but they're going to
give
have
the rub.
that, is what I'm saying. You've got look, Trish Stratus is not going to be facing the Raw Women's Champion at that pay-per-view. At least I don't believe she will. So
No.
like I said, you've got 5 matches already that are going to feature. You're going to have the NXT talents featured in one of those matches, NXT UK talents. You're going to have whoever the Raw, SmackDown women's champions are defending. So right there, in those 5 matches, that's 10 women that are all going to be, new, when I say new talent, I'm talking about today's talent, So I don't have a problem with them peppering in, I don't know how long this pay-per-view is going to be. Is it going to be 3 hours? You're going to have what? Maybe 8, 9 matches? So look, if you've already got 5, how many more are you going to have? 3 or 4? So, okay, I don't have a problem with them sprinkling into, a Mickie James versus a Trish Stratus with Vicky Guerrero as the special guest referee. I don't have a problem with that for one of the matches. It's not going to nothing is going to be taking away from the fact that at the end of this show, the champions, the Ronda Rouseys, the Charlotte Flairs, those are the ones that are going to be shining. Those are the ones that are going to be on top. It's just like if they did any kind of nostalgia act at a WrestleMania, So again, if we knew nothing about this show, if all we knew after the announcement on Raw this week was, women's only pay-per-view and it's going to feature legends, then I would say, well, that's ridiculous. Because if this is all this show's going to be about, but, it's not. It's going to be more akin, I think, to the Raw 25th anniversary show, which is still putting the emphasis on, the talents of today while giving you that peppering of nostalgia in bringing in the legends, the Kellys and the Trish Stratuses, who we know can still entertain.
I will be surprised.
I don't have a problem with that, knowing that this is probably going to be a stacked deck that will feature a lot of the new talents and today's talents in a very meaningful way. At least that's what I would hope.
I mean, I think it's possible. I would be surprised. I mean, and I wouldn't be surprised if a Trish Stratus challenged Alexa Bliss.
Well, look, hey, look, man. You want to talk about how much talent that company has? You want to sit here and talk about and ask me, if it's a problem that the product isn't good. Look at that roster. No one can argue that the WWE roster right now, including the NXT talents, is not the greatest professional wrestling roster in the history of professional wrestling. And yet they don't know how to use 75% of the talents that are on that roster. The Bray Wyatts and the Matt Hardys and the Dolph Zigglers, all right, whatever. Forget about Dolph Ziggler right now, but you know what I mean. They cannot.
You can never forget about Dolph Ziggler.
These top stars like they want to, and yet all they have in that company is a bunch of top stars. So, I don't put anything past them when it comes to them potentially ruining this pay-per-view with something like Trish Stratus challenging, Alexa Bliss for the title. I mean, that would be ridiculous, but yeah, I wouldn't put it past them. But hey, we'll see. That will go toward answering this question of, can the women really draw? We will see how much emphasis WWE is really going to put on the legends. But my guess right now is they're not going to. I think they're going to be there to just add emphasis, add color to a pay-per-view that is going to be anchored by the women of today's WWE women's division.
Before we have to jump into something else that is kind of, that maybe you and I would agree, we might actually disagree a little bit on, but we'll talk Roman Reigns, we'll talk Bobby Lashley and Brock Lesnar, we'll talk that whole gamut here in a minute. Now that seems official, although there's still some people thinking that they could change it up a little bit and maybe make it a triple threat. I would be surprised by that. But before we jump into Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns, that I know everybody's going to love for us to talk about, expect us to shit on. Before we get into that, I do want to talk about something that has excited me at least a little bit, and that's Braun Strowman and Kevin Owens. The idea that now Kevin Owens at SummerSlam has the ability to take away the Money in the Bank briefcase. Nick, is there any thought in your mind, like any way in your head that Kevin wins this match?
No. And the reason why is because I think it ties directly into the route WWE went this week with Roman Reigns and Bobby Lashley. I think WWE, you always have to remember that even though we might sit here and say, man, we're scratching our heads, why Reigns again? It's in Brooklyn. Reigns is going to get booed out of the building. WWE knows this.
Sure.
So they have a plan B in Braun Strowman. And I think that is, honestly, a major percentage of the reason why they went in the direction of Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam. Now, my pick, I wanted to see a triple threat match between him, Lashley, and Lesnar. With Lashley losing this week, his SummerSlam plans are now very much up in the air. I don't know what they're going to do with him. It is still very possible that could be a triple threat match. But let's work under the assumption that that is a singles match at SummerSlam. I think WWE, and honestly, look, we already saw it at WrestleMania. Let's make this very clear. I want to reiterate this again for people who might not know. as we head into SummerSlam. And we, of course, in the weeks ahead, we will continue talking about Brock Lesnar's future, him going over to UFC, fighting Daniel Cormier. Brock Lesnar's contract with WWE expired at WrestleMania 34. As soon as his match concluded with Roman Reigns, that was the final match of his contract. They decided shortly before WrestleMania that, you know, they were going to do the finish with Brock Lesnar winning. Brock Lesnar signed a small extension to his contract that saw 2 more matches, and it would take him through August. So we already saw the first match, which was at Greatest Royal Rumble, and we're getting that second match now at SummerSlam with his contract expiring in August. All right, so when you look at what happened with WrestleMania, you know, that was almost an audible that was called in the days and hours leading up to WrestleMania. They could very well do the exact same thing as it pertains to SummerSlam. And now they've got a massive plan B in their pocket, which is Braun Strowman. So they could say to themselves, all right, let's go with Lesnar versus, and I could see this happening. Let's go with Lesnar versus Reigns at SummerSlam singles match. We're going to work under the impression that, you know, depending on how they do this build up to SummerSlam, we're going to go under the impression that Brock Lesnar is going to be the heel and Roman Reigns is going to be the babyface. And that Roman Reigns is going to get cheered in Brooklyn at SummerSlam. And if that happens, we're going to go through with the finish of Roman Reigns clean pinning or clean, whatever you want to, however the finish is, clean defeating Brock Lesnar, becoming the new champion. But if that doesn't happen, if for some reason SummerSlam rolls around, and you'll know as soon as that entrance music hits, and if that crowd is booing Brock Lesnar out of the building, I guarantee you they could have a plan B already established, already rehearsed, ready to go, that says the referee at some point will let them know during the match, we're going to plan B, and that means, you know, whatever it is, Roman Reigns beats Brock Lesnar, he celebrates with the title for a minute, Braun Strowman's music hits, he comes out, he wins, and sends the crowd home happy. Do you see a finish like that being very possible? And I'm talking about an absolute audible that's being called in the middle of that match at SummerSlam.
No, because I don't think that it needs. I think at this point, I don't give a lot of credit to WWE, as we've been discussing how bad the product has been lately. I do give them enough credit to not think they believe at this point that Roman Reigns is actually going to get cheered. I don't think there's any chance in hell he gets cheered. Therefore, I don't look at that as a plan B. It might be your scenario is probably a plan B. I agree with you there, but I don't think it's a plan B to whether Roman gets cheered or booed, because I don't think there's anybody in their right mind that thinks he's going to come out there and be an overwhelming babyface, if a babyface at all.
Look, man, they're doing. Would you agree they are doing an absolutely great job of making you not care about Brock Lesnar?
Yes.
And I'm using that phrase specifically, not care. I'm not saying really dislike or hate.
Right.
Because he's just not there. I'm at this point, I'm completely indifferent to Brock Lesnar. I have no desire to see this match because I don't care about Brock Lesnar. He's never there. He never defends the title. I don't know what this storyline really is. I mean, you know.
Yeah, I think that goes to the.
You know, we speculated this before. I mean, WWE's got to know that Brock Lesnar is leaving after August and not coming back, because they are making it so abundantly clear or at least I believe they are making it so clear that as a fan, you are supposed to not care about this guy because this guy does not care about you. Why else would a company tell this kind of a story with one of its top draws if they didn't know he's not coming back?
Well, I agree with that, but I also think that regardless of what they work out, I think if they had him on a John Cena schedule or I think it's the communication or lack thereof that maybe makes them position Brock and their company a little differently than they do someone like a John Cena or even a Rock. I mean, I don't think the fans mind that The Rock or John Cena have outside, commitments these days. Like, and I think they're fine with when they get these guys. Like, hey, when Rock comes back for his once in a blue moon appearances, I'm all for it. Like, I mean, just because it's still The Rock. I think Brock could be that type of draw if he wasn't the champion. That's why I think your plan B scenario moves up to plan A, one way or the other. I feel like, or I say that, the plan A is to get the title off of Brock at SummerSlam. I think that's plan A. Regardless of what happens with him, regardless of whether the communications is in a bad way right now, or if they are completely communicative and then it's just an amicable decision for him to go in a separate direction or him to work a very limited part-time schedule. I don't think I don't think which scenario it is, truthfully, matters at all. I think they're going to find a way to get the title off of Brock. The question now, Nick, is should it be Roman Reigns, and should it be someone like Braun Strowman with the very outside chance of a Kevin Owens, even with this match being set up? And Nick, I want to disagree a little bit in the sense of what at least fans think. And I know you've talked mostly about not caring about Brock. I'm curious to what you think about. I'm curious to what you actually think about Roman Reigns at this point. Last week, and of course every week you and I have talked in the last couple of months, we've always put over the fact that they need to completely go heel. And I don't think they're going to do there's no big heel turn coming, because I don't think it would be effective. I mean, I think he's got such a fraction of people that actually cheer for him. You're not going to notice a difference at this point. So my question, Nick, is, this week on Raw, his promo backstage was pretty much like, hey, I know I might get booed, and I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember exactly how he phrased this or said it, but I might get booed, but you can learn to deal with it or whatever, and shut your mouth or something along those lines, Nick. And that's what I said last week with Brian. I'm thinking, or maybe with you a couple of weeks ago, but I've put over, they need to start moving him in that direction. Let his promos be honest. Quit trying to make him a legit babyface when he's not. When the fans don't treat him as such, it's just too awkward with him and his promos anymore, because he's still trying to say all the babyface things to say. He didn't this week. And so my question to you, Nick, because I believe wholeheartedly that a true, downright nasty, mean heel Roman Reigns would be something people care about, something people want to see. I believe that, and I'm curious. I want to see them go down that path with him. I want to see just a nasty, downright, don't give a shit type of Roman Reigns, and see where that goes. Screw all the fans. Screw all the make-a-wishes. Screw everything. Let him go downright nasty and be the title holder, and let people boo him like they already want to, but at least give the other small fraction of people a reason to boo him. Let him be your biggest heel in the company, especially considering they do a bad job of creating heels when they try to force it. This is something they've tried to do the complete. They've really tried to garner any other opposite effect of what he's actually getting, and yet people are booing him like more than they booed the traditional heels on the show. So to me, Nick, my question to you now, I believe that Roman Reigns still does have a lot of leg left, but what do you think about the idea? And do you think this week was an indicator that maybe they're starting to head in that direction of a smoother transition to a heel, because they understand the outcome, and they also probably understand where they're going now? They know he's about to win the title, and he might not drop it to Braun right away. He might not drop it to someone like Kevin Owens, and I definitely don't think he's going to lose to Brock Lesnar again. So I think they're looking at this as, we know he's going to be booed. We know he's going to be the champion. Let's start actually pushing him in the direction of, I don't care. Because otherwise, I mean, you can't keep this up after he actually wins the title, because then the chorus of boos at the volume of 8-9 every week as it is already goes to a 15 as soon as he wins the title. They have to start positioning him as a heel, because he's already going to be that and then some once he wins the title. But I think that can be interesting. Do you not?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, there's so much that they could do. I mean, and like you said, he was teasing already. I mean, I think he even made reference to being shoved down fans' throats. On Monday night.
On Monday, yeah, exactly.
So he's already doing this idea of I don't care. This is my yard. I'm taking what I want. And sure, man. You want to get this guy over as a heel. Here's the issue. Like I said, you go back to Brock Lesnar. He's going up against a guy at SummerSlam that really, honestly, I don't care if he beats him or not. I don't really care.
Yeah.
Put Roman Reigns in the ring with someone that I do care about in that sense. Have him destroy a Daniel Bryan. Have him destroy someone that, I really get behind. Have him rip Finn Balor's, Finn Balor for everyone t-shirt apart, and say, I don't care about you and the people you support. And you know what I mean? Feed him someone that we really care about in that sense. And I 100% think that you could get him over as a heel in that sense. And then I think in the long run, that would then help him become a baby face when the fans eventually, when he pulls back on that and the fans eventually see that he's just sort of this badass that doesn't care about anything. It's what they did with Stone Cold, right? For all practical purposes, Stone Cold was a heel.
Oh, he was.
He attacked
100%.
everybody. He stunned Jim Ross. He stuns Booker T. When those guys were baby faces, he doesn't care. His motto was, you step through my ropes, your ass is mine, So give him that kind of an attitude. And I think the fans will eventually at some point, after he maybe enjoys a lengthy heel run, come around to him as a baby.
And also, let me say this: I don't think that if the communication is broken down between WWE and Brock Lesnar, to the point that they didn't know he was going to do what he did at UFC. I mean, they knew he was talking about it. They didn't know he was going to do the in-ring segment. Apparently, from what the reports say, if communication is broken down to such a point that Brock is being a dick to WWE just to be one, and he knows he's on his way out. If they know he's going to be on his way out. And because they have to start making, and one of the things that Roman said in his promo was, I'm gonna kick his ass type stuff, which I know could just be a generic statement he says, but I think there's more to it. If this is Brock's last pay-per-view, and WWE knows that, and plus if communication is broken down and Brock isn't playing ball with Vince the way they want to, it would not surprise me, Nick, because they've done this with Brock before, so why not with Roman? Especially in his transition, and this would kick off his title reign pretty damn well in my mind, that this could be a squash match. A very short match. Roman absolutely annihilates Brock Lesnar. You see a different side of him. Is that far-fetched in your mind? Is that out of the realm of possibility?
Well, it's not. Nothing's out of the realm of possibility. It would have to be done very correctly and very well, though. He would have to. See, look, everybody loved it when Brock Lesnar did that to John Cena because nobody wanted to see John Cena in that position, right? They wanted to see John Cena get beat like that. So no one wants to see Roman Reigns win this match at SummerSlam.
Well, they want to see a different side. They want to see a different side of Roman.
If Roman Reigns went nuts, and if this were like a 12-minute just utter destruction, that ended with him, doing a thing where, Brock Lesnar is leaving, and so the storyline is that he literally just ended Brock Lesnar's career. And destroyed him so badly, and he's got to get taken to a hospital or something along those lines. Yeah, I think the fans would like that. I think the fans could get into that. Hey, look, they're not going to get into a wrestling match. They're not going to get into a wrestling match with Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar. They don't want to see it. So, yeah, why not give them that idea? Why not give them an idea like that? It's something different because we know the fans don't want to watch a wrestling match. They don't want to see Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns get in there. Brock Lesnar is going to hit. To me, this has, and again, we still have a lot of buildup that has to go here. I don't know how they're going to build this thing up. But look, this is a feud that's been going on for how long now? It feels like the fans just don't want to see this anymore. We haven't seen Brock Lesnar since the Greatest Royal Rumble. This has the writing on the wall to me. The fans know he's going to UFC, even if he stays with WWE. They know he's fighting in UFC. So that half gives the fans the impression that he's gone and out of here.
Yeah.
So this has the writing on the wall to me. It feels deja vu with Brock Lesnar versus Goldberg the first time around. And if you remember, who was the star of Brock Lesnar versus Goldberg the first time around? It was Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Right.
Because they knew these two guys are gone. We can't really put much into, obviously it's a very different situation. Roman Reigns is the future of the company. But if he's being booed out of the building, if it's the same crowd reaction as Lesnar versus Goldberg the first time around, and the fans are just taking a massive dump all over this match, who might be your star here? Braun Strowman?
Possibly.
So yeah, sure. If you want to shock and awe the audience with an idea like that, where, maybe Brock Lesnar is making his entrance, and maybe Roman Reigns attacks him during his entrance, and then the ref has to check on him and say, are you good to go? And he says he's okay to go. And then Roman Reigns just absolutely destroys him. Sure, the sheer shock of that, just like, hey, look, remember Brock Lesnar versus Goldberg at Survivor Series when Goldberg beat him in 1 minute?
Yep.
You didn't even have time to formulate whether or not you liked that match because you were so surprised by what you were seeing. So I guess if they went in a direction like that, I could see something like that work.
Well, and I think, look, at the end of the day, the worst thing they could do is let these guys go out there and have a 12 to 16 minute back and forth match. That's my thing. I mean, that's the crowd is going to,
they don't want to see,
they don't want to see that for either guy. And you know what? That's probably what we get. But either way, I think that they are starting to shape up. And what do they have to lose with Roman Reigns going ballistic? And they've got to do something different. I mean, they need to do something different as a whole. But I think they definitely need to do something different with Roman Reigns. And also, don't count out my guy, Kevin Owens. He's one of the most entertaining guys to watch on TV. You can tell, it seems to me like Vince and them are pretty high on him right now as well. I don't think he beats Braun Strowman, but I don't think that's a stretch either necessarily right now for kind of a shock and awe and to get him over. I think I just think that there's something interesting going on with Kevin Owens at least, and I hope that's the case. I hope they can find a way to keep him elevating upwards alongside Braun Strowman and their plans, it seems, with him. But I'm very interested and intrigued by the matchup with Kevin Owens, and I really hope they find a way to utilize him even further going forward. But guys, that's going to do it for Nick and I. However, we are very happy to announce that we have an interview special for you tonight or today on the tail end of the show. Mike Killam of ProWrestling.com had an interview, and he gave us the ability to air it here on The Voice of Wrestling, and we're going to do that in just a second. But Nick, why don't you tell everybody what this is about, and then of course, guys, we will see you next week.
Yeah, guys, this is an exclusive interview that Mike Killam did with Ring of Honor star Punishment Martinez. This interview was conducted in full over at ProWrestling.com. So if you head over there, ProWrestling.com, you can check out the entire interview where he talks about a wide range of topics. But in the clip that we are going to play right now, he specifically talks a little bit about his biggest influences in pro wrestling. He talks a lot about The Undertaker, and he talks about how he celebrated, or actually how he didn't really celebrate, his Ring of Honor World Television title win. And it's a very interesting listen. This is Punishment Martinez from Ring of Honor. Again, the full interview can be found at ProWrestling.com. Guys, thanks for listening to the show this week. For Chris Cash, I am Nick Paglino. We will see you next week on The Voice of Wrestling.
Yeah, it's funny that you say the big men. I know I'm above average. I would guess, but I've never considered myself like that type of big man. I'm just like I might be a little bit bigger than most guys, but I never wanted my style to be a big man style. Like I didn't want to be classified into one, direct one. This is you. This is who you are. Obviously, the number one guy to me was always Undertaker. Okay. Always. And it wasn't because of moves. It was everything else. The moves and his in-ring ability was extra. He drew me in just on his charisma and his persona. But of course, he's an athletic big man that if you watch me work, you can tell there's some aspects that I've picked up from him. But then there was like Razor Ramon. I was always big on Razor Ramon. And then anybody, because I practiced martial arts when I was younger, anybody who did any type of kick or martial arts in their style, I was drawn to. Like even, 1, 2, 3 Kid, X-Pac. He was a smaller guy, but I always liked his moves because I could do them, and that was off my alley. Same thing with RVD, and even guys like Glacier in WCW. Like, I loved his character, but I also loved the style because it represented what my background was about, martial arts, karate background. So those were always cool to me. But then character-wise, I was like I said, Undertaker, the Crow Sting, and guys like that. So whenever I describe myself, they're like, well, what do you describe your style? And I feel like it's unfair for me to put myself in just one position. I like to think of myself as like a hybrid of styles where I've studied and because I take respect and appreciation of different styles, and so I try to incorporate them. Whether it's strong style, lucha style, American style, UK style, the European style. And then, and everything in between. And, with like a shoot fighting background, you try to implement it in your style, in your in-ring style as well. So that's, it might sound like a cool line, but I really do think I'm like a hybrid of different styles because I worked on it, I really studied and I really tried to make it different. That's why as a big man, they're like, well, you do things that other big men don't do. It's like, yeah, well, because for so many years, big men were told you have to work like this because you're a big man. Now we have a little bit more freedom where it's not just, hey, you have to do it this way because you're a big man. That's the rule. It's not a rule anymore. So I think guys are able to go out of their comfort zone and adapt to different styles. And that's why you see there's just so much more athleticism. Yeah. So I try not to celebrate before it happens. So what I told the news and I'm like, okay, but I keep my serious face on, inside, of course, I'm like, oh my God, but I'm still trying to keep it together because to the last second, you never know what can change. Sure. And I've been disappointed so many times, especially in professional wrestling, that I don't want to take anything like it's a given, till it actually happens. So my focus was just putting on a performance. My focus was just putting on a match. It was a main event of that show. So my focus was just, let's put on a main event quality match. Like, that's it. And then enjoy it as it happens. And then when it finally happened, that moment was surreal. It was, I could not believe that, this is life, you work for things and you set goals and dreams and whatever, and you can work as hard as you want, but just because the hardest worker in the room does not get the opportunity, that's not real life. You might have the best chance, but sometimes it's luck. But when you really work hard for something and then you achieve it, it's like, I think that feeling is extra special. And that's pretty much where I was when this happened, where I couldn't believe it. Like, I actually worked for something like this and I've been saying this is what I wanted. And then it happened. Like, that's not normal. So it was extra special. I was extremely humbled. There was no partying for me. It was go to my hotel room. And I really didn't, I also didn't want to celebrate in front of certain guys, just because, sure, guys are working to get in that position. And I know what it feels like when you're not there and others are there, So by myself, when I got to my hotel room, I took the belt out of my bag and I really just put it on my lap. And I just sat there on the edge of the bed, just in awe of life, not just that I was champion. It's just a cool time to be not only in this business, but to be in something positive, and this is a positive thing for my life, for pro wrestling, for, just for a lot of things. And it just felt extra special for a lot of different reasons other than just being a champion in Ring of Honor. There. But for me personally, because I was born in New York City, because in my teens were spent basically in New York City, in the mid-'90s, I went to every single event at Madison Square Garden that WWF held because my dad would take me to every single one. I was there for so many memorable moments. And so the Garden, for me, wrestling-wise, it's huge. Like I said, I'm a New Yorker, and I've never been to a New York Knicks game at Madison Square Garden, but I've been to, I can't even count how many WWF events. Performing at the Hammerstein was, the ultimate moment for me as far as New York. Just because Madison Square Garden, it's not that it was something that I thought we weren't capable of. I just thought it wasn't a possibility. So I never
unattainable at the time.
Right. So that was a dream I didn't even know I had as far as when it comes to Ring of Honor. Then as soon as it became a possibility, then it was this is it. This is probably the biggest moment of my life is going to be able to perform at Madison Square Garden with Ring of Honor. So it's extra special because of the building and the city it's in, for me personally. But it doesn't mean that nobody else feels, that this is a big deal as far as the company. All the guys know how huge this is. This is what I'm talking about as far as history changing moments where they're going to last forever. Like, you want to be something in this business, you could be a champion, you could headline shows, but at the end of the day, I think the main thing is to leave your name etched in history. And if you're on the show, if you work for Ring of Honor, that's what you're doing. This is going to last forever. So, and we know this, so it's incredible feeling. It's super exciting, and the fans alike, they should be extremely excited to be a part of history.